are going to talk about the power of protein. Now, I feel like I should have like an echo in my voice when I say power. Maybe we can edit that in. But I think that title could be taken a number of different ways, but I think it's accurate because there are so many different reasons that everyone needs to have protein in their diet. Everyone, I think, regardless of your goals, needs protein. Now, when I was thinking about this, I remember when I was working at a supplement shop a number of years back, and of course, one of our biggest sellers was protein powder. And I remember it seemed to be a more common than I would have thought, a comment that people would make coming in, that maybe someone was just getting started working out or training, and they would come in and say, I'm just getting started training, I'm starting a new workout routine. I was told that I need protein after my workout, but I don't want to get huge muscles. And I think we can kind of laugh at that, like at least on the inside, but I think that is a common misperception when, maybe it's more when you're thinking about supplements, but I guess the point there is that, number one, that's not going to happen. Number two, there are so many different reasons that we need to consume protein, and maybe a population of people that thinks that they don't need protein and maybe moving towards other macronutrients, that they actually do need a lot more protein than they realize. So we'll get into that a little bit later as we go into our conversation. But from your perspective, I mean, you studied nutrition far more than I have. What are those roles and benefits of protein that you can think of right off the bat?
Yeah, and going back to the whole like the power of protein concept, it really is like, so when I would teach my nutrition classes, I mean, it really is the power nutrient, so to speak, because it just does so many things. Like there's almost nothing in your body that protein is not involved in.
Right.
It has many roles. It's used for so many things. And the reason why protein powder, it's seen as like, has been seen, or, it can be seen as just something that's uniquely muscle building. Mm-hmm. Protein has been so synonymously tied to muscle. And as like a good portion of our muscle tissue is protein, it's amino acids. But that's such a small fraction protein is used for in the body. And when we say protein, we're really talking about amino acids. Like that's the thing that, proteins are these chains of amino acids that are built into these molecules that all have various functions.
Yep.
All of the enzymes in our body are amino acids, are proteins. Most of the hormones in our body are proteins. Most of the physical structures in our body are proteins. The vast majority of our immune system is proteins. Like, again, there's literally nothing, there's probably no role in the body that protein is not involved in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Because if anything is amino acid based, we need to supply those amino acids. So like most people know, we've got non-essential amino acids, we have essential amino acids. The essential amino acids are those that we need to consume via the diet because we cannot make them ourselves. Like all these non-essential amino acids, our body can make those on its own, but we need essentials coming in from the diet, or all the things that all the amino acids, all the peptides that we make cannot happen or occur without those essentials in sufficient. So that's like the basis. So basically all, like, the list is endless for things that you're protein that require protein. But for sport, for fitness, we primarily are thinking about muscle tissue and the tissues that need to be repaired or recovered, that are utilized or damaged through training, and then the need to adapt to those things.
Right, absolutely. And to your point, I mean, you're talking about amino acids, basically, is what we're talking about when we're talking about protein. I think one of the points that we might get into maybe more in depth is that amino acids can't be stored like maybe like glycogen or something like that in our body. So we do need protein, I guess, frequently throughout the day. But the whole goal is to, and yeah, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more, is to, I guess, have the rate of protein synthesis greater than your rate of muscle breakdown. And this could be, you know, whether you are not getting enough nutrients and start to break that down, regardless of whether you're working out, or of course, when we're talking about sports performance or, you know, lifting weights in the gym, we are breaking that down, but we do need that protein to kind of stimulate that protein synthesis so that we can continue building and at the very minimum, like maintain what we have.
Right. And that is the unique thing about protein that really differentiates it from the other two macronutrients is the fact that we do not store it in the sense that we put it into a spot and it just kind of stays there for usage when we need it. So we have glycogen stores in our muscle and our liver for carbohydrates, and obviously we have our adipose tissue for fat. Now we have like depots of protein, you know, like where there's a high amount of it. Again, muscle tissue being a good example. But as you stated, that's always in a state of turnover. So there's always a synthesis or a building up of those proteins occurring, and always a breakdown or degradation of those proteins occurring, always, at all times. So like there's going to be a rate that will predominate, right? So if we do not have amino acids coming in from the diet, if protein is not coming in from the diet in sufficient amounts, the breakdown side of the equation will, quote unquote, win out. The rate of will predominate. And then it's best to think of this on like a 24-hour cycle, because if you're really like, you know, really in the moment, it can be kind of confusing, but you have to think about what's going to win out over the course of a day. That's kind of how you want to think about it. Because that's where the timing comes into play and the frequency play. And anytime we have amino acids coming in, we have this short time frame where synthesis wins out. Okay? Way above breakdown, you're building things up. The processes that require the amino acids to build tissues or build enzymes or build immune cells or whatever it may be, those are getting like, you know, go over here, go over there. We are synthesizing that, you know, at the DNA level. So, but then eventually that goes back down. So it's this like balance of this process that we need to leverage, and we need to make the most of, so to speak, through nutrition. That's a unique thing. Like if you like glycogen is unique in the fact that you could have a huge dose of carbohydrates. We could put in a, you know, have a pancake feast of pancakes and maple syrup, and we consume 500, 600 grams of carbohydrates. You know, let's pretend that our glycogen stores are empty. Like we just got done, for whatever reason, we ran a marathon. I don't know why people...
I know that's not going to be the case for you. You're not going to run a marathon.
And then in theory, you know, we can store all of those carbohydrates for later use. If we ingest 100 grams of protein in a sitting, we do not have that ability. We'll utilize what we need for the demands at that time, and then the rest will not really go towards those purposes. Like other things will happen to it, whether it be we excrete the nitrogen or but it only is going to fulfill the demands that are needed at the time. And that gets into the importance of needing protein throughout the day. You really can't meet your amino acid and protein needs if you just try to get it all in one sitting. And that's between like fat, carbohydrates, and protein. So if you're not leveraging correctly, you may be leaving really recovery, I would say, is what's getting impacted the most if that's not being taken care of, or if that's not being leveraged properly. because protein and amino acids are not a preferred or readily utilized energy source. So even though protein has 4 calories per gram, just like carbohydrates, amino acids, if we're utilizing those for energy to any large degree, we're in trouble. Something's not right. We're either starving or in a very deep period of fasting, or we're in a very long period, deep period of exercise. So that a marathon would be a good example, or an Ironman or something like that. That's super, very, very long. If you don't have the right carbohydrate intake throughout the event, you will start to utilize amino acids for energy, and we do not want to be in that situation. Now, will this happen if you don't have your protein shake after your workout? If you wait 61 minutes versus 59, not going to happen.
Right.
Even if your protein intake, maybe a day you had only 2 servings, like main servings of protein, as long as you get back on to a regular intake relatively quickly, you'll be fine, typically. But if you're using amino acids for energy, that's typically not good for performance and definitely not good for recovery.
Right. A couple of things there that kind of stood out was the idea of maybe that nutrient timing versus just getting a steady dose of protein throughout the day. Where what I took from what you said is, I mean, there is this perception that you have to get protein immediately after, but I think if you are getting adequate protein throughout the day, then you don't necessarily have to hit that supposed timing window. It is the way I'm understanding everything. And I know everyone likes their research. To your point there, I know of I think it was 2018 research study by Brad Schoenfeld, actually. And he kind of spoke to that. I'm not going to get into all the details of it. I mean, there are so many different nuances that you can go into a research study. But one of the points that he was making in that study was that you're going to maximize protein's effectiveness in terms of building if you spread out that protein throughout the day. And he even recommended, trying to get that 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, saying roughly, 0.4 grams per kilogram of body weight per meal, up to, about half a gram per meal per day. And that's kind of how he explained it. And I think that's a really good way for people to look at this in terms of, you don't have to eat a huge meal of protein all at once, but rather you're going to get great benefits if you do spread out that protein throughout the day and just really kind of keep it consistent.
Yeah, and that goes back to, because we don't store it, and because we need synthesis, because synthesis is like the hare and breakdown's like the tortoise. Yeah, breakdown's kind of like, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. And if there's no new amino acids coming in, I'm going to, my activity is going to raise up a little bit. And then when amino acids come in, it goes down just a little bit. But it just kind of keeps going along. Right. This is like, I eat protein, I'm going way up. Yeah. And I'm going to go back down after like an hour. Yeah. Non-existent. So we kind of need that constant signal. I'm doing this because if anyone looks at the protein graph between that's what happens. It's like eat protein, goes down, eat protein, goes down. And you need that multiple times throughout the day to, again, have synthesis, the rate of it, be more prominent than breakdown. And I'm glad you mentioned Dr. Schoenfeld's papers, because he really has, from a protein timing, an amount, and is also a nutrient timing, he really has, I think, probably the most well referenced, and those papers get commonly cited. So if anyone's talking about years ago, probably was 2018 at this point, or longer than you would think, he co-authored a paper about specifically nutrient timing, focusing on protein, and especially looking at the post-exercise. Is there like an anabolic window post-exercise? And then he later had one that I actually reference a lot. And I don't think I own, but it's just a unique question, where he just tried to answer the question, like, how much protein should you eat per meal
Mm-hmm.
to actually to maximize you know the effect on muscle, whether that's building new muscle and more of it, or just recovering from it, and like you kind of mentioned earlier, not gaining per se, because that's
Right.
really also by your training. Like the training is the signal here. So even if someone was, we have two people eating the same amounts of protein, and one is resistance training at high volumes and the other person is not, this person's going to build muscle because they have the stimulus there. This person, no, the protein amount is the same. It just isn't, because the signal's not there to say, hey, build muscle. But what he found, the amount that he came out to based on the literature he looked at, was about 0.4 to 0.5 grams per kilogram per meal is in that sweet spot of like, the amino acids you take in, it's going to cover all your bases from a physiological standpoint. And then the leftover is going to get used for muscle building or repair. Beyond that, you're not really going to gain much benefit. It's not going to hurt you by any means. But you're looking for that kind of like maximal intake amount. And what I like about it is it's way more individualized. Because what do we typically hear 20 to 30 grams per meal, right?
Right. Yep.
So when it comes down to intake, we need to think of like, this is going to be tied to how big you are as a person. How big you are, really, if you want to get really specific, you would want to know how much lean body mass you have.
Right.
Well, really specific would be muscle tissue. Lean body mass is good enough. 30 grams, someone that may be more than someone needs, which again, is not for anybody. But I think, so there's a person I think about protein needs. There's one person I always think about. His name is Spencer Remick. He was an offensive lineman he was a teammate of mine, offensive lineman. He actually just competed in the most recent World's Strongest Man for the first time.
Okay.
A big guy.
6'4",
5", 300 plus pounds, lots of muscle tissue. 30 grams per meal is not enough for him.
Right.
Never going to meet it. So he needs to think about, like, if he applies this, he's going to meet his needs a lot better than thinking about just the 30 grams. And the reason that usually gets pointed out is because that, based on the literature it's based off of, maximizes the protein synthetic response. But we have to account for how much total muscle tissue does a person have, and the person who has more muscle tissue is going to need more amino acids to maintain that muscle tissue. So 0.4 to 0.5 grams per kg seems to be kind of that sweet spot for a protein amount per meal. And then ideally you would space that out throughout the day with a little bit of time in between. What's kind of interesting is that having that dip, that protein synthesis go back down to normal, to baseline, is actually a good thing. We would not want to try to have that elevated all the time. Like I'm sure you know this, and I'm sure some of the listeners or the people watching have always seen the guy with the jug of BCAAs. You're going to stay anabolic all day, and you're not going
right.
to race. So you actually need that dip for the signal for the next intake of amino acids to have the synthesis go up again. But when looking at total, so basically what you want to do is you look at your total amount. What do I need totally? And you said it earlier, if you missed it, the total amount that's typically recommended, really regardless of what your goals are, is 1.6 to 2 grams per kilogram.
Right.
Most people just make it easy and go 1 gram per pound of body weight.
Yeah.
There's really no population that is going to be hurt by that per se. Not dangerous in any way. And even the lower end so the lower end would be like endurance athletes. They don't have an and to repair and build muscle tissue. That's 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. That's not all 1 gram per kg. And then the upper end would be strength, hypertrophy focus, strength and power sports, and then weight loss.
Right.
Like the other high end requirement or recommendation is people who are actually trying to lose weight.
Right.
About that 1 gram per pound, 2.2 grams per kilogram. And the reason for that is because at that intake, the weight loss comes more from fat tissue than just general all tissue. You want to lose body fat, keep the muscle, and that's why that protein intake or recommendation is higher.
Right, and I'm glad you mentioned that. That's something that I wanted to get into next. We can talk about muscle building. We can talk about protein for performance. But I think there is a large population, including some athletes that might need to lose weight, maybe specifically lose fat. I guess unless you're maybe in a sport like gymnastics or wrestling, where you need to focus it specifically on that number, on that weight. But even non-athletes that might be looking to lose fat, and that's the specific reason that they're working out. I think there is a perception that, of course, there's the degree that you want to, have some sort of calorie restriction, obviously, to take in fewer calories if you are trying to lose that weight. But I think the important thing is that maybe a lot of those people aren't doing is keeping their protein levels at least the same or increasing them a little bit, even though they're decreasing their other macronutrients. And one of the big reasons, you spoke to some of those reasons already, but one of the interesting reasons is the satiating effects, the satiating effects of protein. I know there's one research study that I don't have it off the top of my head right now, but it spoke to the idea that people who maintain diets higher in protein actually consume fewer calories in their next meal. And I think it was, I think the specific one was somewhere around like 30 fewer calories in their next meal. But that's, again, because of the satiating effects of protein that just kind of kept them full. So that, and maybe that also goes to the idea that they don't end up, binging on other foods, snacking needlessly, I guess, just to kind of fill that void of what they're feeling. So something definitely to keep in mind for everyone wanting to lose fat, wanting to lose weight. Don't skip out on your protein, because that might be one of the more important nutrients that you can get from it.
Yeah. From a body comp standpoint, like I said earlier, increasing the protein helps you hold on to your muscle tissue, which is vital for performance, body composition, recovery. Then, as you mentioned, the other you increase your satiety or your sense of feeling full and satisfied from your meals, and that alone could reduce caloric intake without you even really change much, other than increasing your protein intake, just by the fact that you don't eat as much because you feel fuller for longer or fuller sooner. It's just the thought, or it can be a common misconception is, well, I'm not an athlete, I don't muscle, I'm not a bodybuilder, I don't need that much protein, I don't. But you actually, like, the recommendation is you should increase your protein. And the need thing is a little interesting, because the flip side there is like, well, what's the danger? Like, what's the danger of too much protein? And there's common things that are associated with it, like, is it going to be harmful for my kidneys? Is it going to replace other nutrients? So if I overemphasize protein, will it decrease my intake of fruit and vegetables, whole grains, and things like that? The latter one just comes down to how are you structuring your diet. That's really not going to, very few people who are focusing on this would have that be the issue. Then from a safety standpoint, on the other end of things, the kidney thing, that's just not been supported over decades to show that if you're healthy, if you have healthy kidneys, if you don't have any pre-existing conditions, that increase in protein intake, again, around the times or the amounts we're talking about, which is a 1 gram per pound of body weight, not anyway. So that's not really something that people would really need to be concerned about per se. And but yeah, it's like that's, again, that one small change, that one simple change could have a huge effect.
Mm-hmm. And anyone at all that's tried to increase their the amount of calories that they're taking in knows how much that protein affects you. I remember at one point, and we've talked about this before, just in kind of random conversations. I used to be very much into distance running. Well, I kind of, started to get away from that. My goals started to change a little bit, and I decided I wanted to try to put on weight. Yep. So I increased my caloric intake from what I had been, and of course changed up my training and everything. Well, when I was increasing my calories, like I literally got tired of eating some days. And it sounds crazy to some people, but I think because I was, I wanted to make sure I was getting enough protein because, to your point earlier, I was trying to build more muscle compared to what I had before. And yeah, it was a struggle to try to get in as many calories as I was trying to get in. So from a fat loss perspective, I mean, that right there is a very good example. If you increase your protein intake, then you are you're going to feel full. You're going to, like you said, likely eat less. You're probably going to binge less or snack less on, maybe some of those sugary foods or some of the foods that you're trying to stay away from, just because, you don't want to eat at that point. So I think anyone who is, especially people that are maybe new to this and trying to get a little bit more insight are probably thinking, okay, I know that I need to increase my protein or at least maintain that, but I'm not sure where to get protein from. Now, aside from, we talked a little bit about, supplements. You can get protein powders, you can get different supplements to go from, but of course, I at least always encourage people to get their nutrients from natural food sources first, and then go toward supplements if they need to, or if they need extra protein or calories. Just real quick, a few ideas or examples here. You're going to get about 8 grams of protein for a cup of milk. So if you're a milk drinker, think about that right away. You're going to get milk, whether you're eating that for breakfast or throughout the day. A lot of people like yogurt in their diet. Now, from what I've seen, you can get about maybe 16 grams of protein for Greek yogurt, and that's in just like a small dose, maybe 6 ounces or so. Excuse me. I'm a big fan of eggs. You can get about 6 grams of protein per one large egg. So, if you're mixing foods together, if you're making breakfast, you can get a pretty good amount of protein from your eggs. Salmon or fish in general. I believe last I saw salmon in general, of course, is going to depend on what exactly the source and what you're getting. You're going to get about 19 grams of protein for about 4 ounces of salmon. So I would say even if you don't like fish, think about how small sometimes like 4 ounces can be. You can get a pretty good amount of protein in that. And then, of course, like turkey, you're going to get a pretty good amount. I think around maybe 30 grams of protein for about 4 ounces of turkey or so. Chicken breast, probably getting close to 20 grams of protein for a 6-ounce chicken breast. If you don't like meat, you can still get protein from vegetable sources, and I think that's important for people to remember. You don't have to overeat on meat or anything like that. So, for example, maybe like a half cup of black beans, you're going to still get about 8 grams of protein there. I know that's something that you mentioned before when we were talking about this going into this conversation is, different protein sources and the quality of different protein sources. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit. I know sometimes there's a perception that you have to eat animal sources of protein to get the highest quality. But it sounds like you've maybe seen some differing opinions there compared to plant-based proteins.
Yeah, there's definitely differing opinions, but there's also just been more research coming out recently that has specifically kind of looked how much does this matter? Like how much does this animal-based protein versus plant protein, is it really that big of a deal? And so if you're unfamiliar here, what we're talking about is what historically has been termed protein quality. Right. Each fan, because it has like this kind of bad connotation to it. So use complete, incomplete, which unfortunately still kind of has that. Mm-hmm. But the reason those are termed that way is because of the amino acid content of those types of foods. So for something to be considered a high quality or complete protein, it has to have per serving a sufficient amount of the essential amino acids. All base protein sources are complete proteins. The plant-based proteins, most of them are considered lower quality or incomplete because they do not have either sufficient amounts of the essential amino acids per serving, or they're very, very low.
Okay.
Now, like, so then the thought process or the recommendation has been, like, you need to focus more on the animal side, less on the plant side. Those are lower quality. So if you eat the same amounts of all animal protein or all plant protein, you're not getting as good of benefits over here because they're lower quality. You're not getting the essential amino acids in the right amounts. Right. But, you know, if you're hitting the amounts that we talked about earlier, even if it's completely from plant-based proteins, and I'll say this is important, having different types of plant-based proteins, like you would not want to do it all via black beans, right, or all via chickpeas. Mm-hmm. Let's not even talk about the fiber content right now. just focusing on the amino acids, you'd want black beans, rice, red beans, quinoa, soy. Like, you'd want all different types because they all have different levels of amino acids, and they just kind of help each other fill in the gaps. Mm-hmm. Now, like, if you just ate chicken, like, that's different. You could actually be okay on that. Okay. It's very good. You get sick of chicken, but you'd be fine. Right. But again, if you have enough of an amount that we discussed, if you're in that 0.5 grams per kg per meal, you're getting that around 1 gram per pound of body weight, I don't think it matters all that much. You might, if you're vegan or you're completely plant-based, you may need to push that up or make sure you're at that 2 grams per kilogram, 1 gram per pound. And if you're completely animal-based, you might be better. You might be okay if you're a little bit below that range, maybe at 1.4. Because, again, they have more of the essential amino acids, which is really what the requirements are based on. Right. It's our amino acid requirements. It's not always just the total amount. But don't overthink it. Don't overblow it. Plant-based proteins are not bad per se. Yeah. And in fact, you can still get a complete protein. Soy is a complete protein. Quinoa is a complete protein. It's just per serving, they have much less. Like, half a cup of black beans was 6 grams? Right. 1 egg is 6 grams, Yeah. And there's also some digestibility issues with plant-based proteins, like, meaning how well does your body break it down and absorb it. Sure. Proteins are basically 100%. Some plant-based proteins, are less than that. So there's some, from a timing perspective, if you're having it around your workout, you probably want to focus more on the animal-based. But with modern science and modern food technology, are the plant-based protein powders that have been engineered, and what you'll see on a label is you'll see a blend: brown rice protein, soy protein, certain types of seed proteins, and they're trying to basically blend the amino acid profiles to create a complete protein that are on par with whey, as far as that is concerned. They might not taste as good, but it's a long way from, like, I think back in the day, when I was working at Nebraska as on the dietetics staff, we had, if you were lactose intolerant or couldn't tolerate dairy, you had one option. It was two options: soy or brown rice protein. That was it. Yeah. Now there are way better proteins on the market.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway from that is to definitely make sure that you're getting a variety of proteins. And I think that should be true regardless if you're going plant-based or animal-based. Just get a variety from your protein sources. Like you said, a lot of people probably can't tolerate the same foods every day anyway, just because they might get bored with it or just getting tired of eating everything. yeah, overall, I want to thank everyone who's been watching and everyone who has stuck with us to this point. But again, try to get a variety of your protein. I think the big idea here is that there are multiple reasons that you need protein in your diet, even if you're not trying to build muscle or if you're not an athlete going for sports performance. You definitely need protein for multiple reasons, even if that is for fat loss, even if that is for weight loss. We have a number of different sources. I know I've talked about, protein and some of the sports nutrition aspects in one of my Learning with Human Kinetics. I know we even talked about sports supplements a little bit in one of our other trainer talks here. So definitely go back and watch some of those. If you want a little more information, I would encourage everyone to, definitely follow us on Instagram. I know you're probably watching this Instagram live right now. Follow us on Facebook. All of these do end up going to YouTube, so you can find a lot of our content there as well. Even if you do watch it there, I encourage you to, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. That way you're getting alerts every time we put out a new video, so you can stay up to date on all of our content. And another source coming soon, or actually now that we're building up, is TikTok. So if you if you have a TikTok account, make sure to follow the new Human Kinetics TikTok account. Don't worry, we're not going to be have dancing trends or anything like that. It will still be education based content, unless Korey wants to.
I'm not you.
No, you will not see me doing any dancing trends on TikTok. But no, that is another, channel that we're getting into to kind of, push out more educational content. We realize that a lot of people are on there. I think with that platform specifically, there might be opportunities to get a little more creative and entertaining with that, aside from dancing trends or anything. So, yeah.
Yeah. Also, just like, if people are wanting, where can you go to continue to learn about this? Like, we have a number of resources. NSCA's Guide to Sport Nutrition.
Yep.
Great one. We've got a few classics. Nancy Clark's Sports Nutrition Guidebook. Power Eating by Susan Kleiner. We have non-nutrition books that have nutrition in them. Donnie, that's right behind you. He's got some information. So, but those are some that you can go to that are great information if you want to dive a little deeper, if you want recipes, if you want more information on the timing aspect of things. I would definitely check those out if you haven't.
Yep. Sounds great. That's a good place to wrap it up there. So everyone, get your protein. Don't skip out on your protein, even if you're reducing your calories. Definitely get your protein, whether that's your chicken breast, your beef, your vegetable-based or plant-based proteins.
Oh, plant-based.
Definitely.
That's another one. I knew I
What's that?
Plant-based sports nutrition. That's another one to check out. We have a book
Good call there. Yeah, that is a good one because no, because we did mention plant-based diets, so that's definitely a good resource to check out for that. So, Korey, it's been fun. I think that was a great conversation. We gave a lot of good information, so hopefully people took something from that. So, I guess we'll wrap it up there, and until next time, we will see everyone later.